In the Gun, episode 30, it's time to recap a season-ending victory in Stillwater against the Oklahoma State Cowboys and get to some of the craziness happening around Morgantown and college football as well. It's ITG. I'm Wesley Euler with the best teammates in the business, the Runaway Beer Truck, Owen Schmidt, and, of course, the Signalcaller, Jed Drenning. This episode of ITG is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup information, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. And as your continued source for all sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. It's always the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports and events, whether that's the NFL, NBA, NHL, MMA, college sports, World Cup, tennis, boxing, and even golf. So head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. And make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. Gentlemen, headlines, as always, to get us started here on the program. And, Jed, some pretty significant headlines across Morgantown, across the state, across the WVU fan base nationally, as Shane Lyons has spoken for the first time since him and WVU parted ways.
Yeah, spoke publicly, sat down with Hoppy Kirchhoff at Metro News on Monday for a pretty extensive interview. They covered a lot of topics. First of all, you learned that Shane very quickly got that call from Greg Byrne at Alabama. Of course, they had a history, and Shane landed in a pretty good spot. Once again, there's been a lot of chatter that there was a possibility that name, image, likeness was attached to this whole situation, some kind of shortcoming or perceived shortcoming on Shane's part. I mean, there's no doubt about it that we got to amp things up one way or the other. The question is how, who's responsible for that, who's behind it, is it the trust, is it somebody else? So those are the types of things discussed. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that Shane didn't really see this coming until a couple days before, when he got a call saying, hey, there's some folks coming for your job. Now, he didn't say who's coming for your job or any of the particulars there, but it all played out and unfolded pretty quickly. I think he said he got that call midweek on Wednesday, and by Sunday he was called in. He was to an already scheduled meeting with President Gee, at which point, after some small talk, it was communicated to him that they were going to part ways. So, and again, this is a guy who we've talked about this in previous podcasts, just had a new deal of his own inked earlier this year. So financially, he's really going to land in a good spot, right? Shane is, and also land with a good position as the number 2 at Alabama behind Greg Byrne. So, but yeah, it was interesting. There's a reason a lot of folks are talking about it, and he even got into some of the other topics, included non-conference scheduling. He said that some of this was done, like the Penn State game was scheduled 10 years out. He didn't schedule the Penn State game, but he was talking about the mindset at one point when the playoffs started was you got to build your non-conference resume, and that's kind of what was a mainstream thought process to get the best look, to put you in the best spot to get into the playoff, and that might not be as much the case today. So, Hoppy and Shane basically talked through, do we really need 2 Power Fives on the schedule when we already play in a conference this difficult? What's interesting, guys, is teamrankings.com. First of all, it has our strength of schedule pegged at 18th in the country, but more impressive than that, all 10 Big 12 schedules were in the top 20 in the country in terms of difficulty. So it just speaks to what a week in, week out slugfest, as we've talked about many times, this is. And so is this the perfect time to be playing these 2 Power Fives non-league? Well, we're opening at Penn State next year, and we got Pitt coming shortly thereafter, but that was part of what was talked about. So where that goes, what it means, we still have Alabama and some others on the schedule down the road, but I also know that we have some 2-1s arranged with some MAC schools. For instance, Ohio, that's become we weren't the first to do that. I'd say 5 to 8 years ago, a number of other schools. I can think of Oklahoma State doing a lot of that. Central Michigan, for instance, they went to South Alabama. Well, the thinking behind that is, from a scheduling standpoint, instead of paying a school to come visit you, you don't pay them, and they come to your place twice, and you return visit once. So West Virginia, in that thinking, will go to Athens to play the Bobcats once for 2 trips to Morgantown, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, a lot of content in that interview. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to hop online and check it out at Metro News.
Well, the ironic part about that too, Jed, is Ohio all of a sudden has a pretty solid program, and they're 9-3 and playing for the MAC championship. So that one
Yes,
doesn't necessarily seem like a like the layup maybe that it was whenever that series was announced. Yeah, there's a lot of meat on that bone in that conversation. But I think you touched on it. I think pretty clearly. I mean, there's a disconnect there. Obviously, there's people who know all the details, and maybe one day they'll all come out and everything. But disconnect between Guy and between Shane Lyons and some things that happened there, seemingly pretty quickly over a couple weeks.
Sure.
That relationship is obviously, it seems fractured, and that was kind of my biggest takeaway. Like, obviously there's all the stuff that Shane discussed, both as it relates to him and the university parting ways, and then, as you mentioned, some of that scheduling stuff. But man, I think it's fair to ask some questions of the president's office now and what's going on at Stewart Hall as well, too, because we've all been doing that with Shane, right, and with the athletic department and with the football program and all these different things. I think they're, accountability seems like it could go a long way in a lot of different departments right now. That's where I'm trying to go with all this. But I tell you what, Big O, and there might be an opportunity to raise some NIL money here. It seems like there's some hard feelings. I mean, maybe we could have a Royal Rumble at Mountaineer Field and charge $10 for entrance and put that towards the NIL fund.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources that we're not really using to generate some sort of income.
Hell, that's something that we'll discuss more this offseason, certainly, and as this all plays out. And that's an interesting angle to this too, Jed. You kind of mentioned that there. How much was the NIL and Shane's his ties to NCAA compliance, and maybe some pushback or some friction there about things that the university wanted to do that Shane wasn't willing to do. Again, I'm not saying that I know anything. It's just, you can start the portal as well too. Yeah,
portal was discussed as well, as Shane mentioned that the portal had some involvement. In other words, the attrition and the exodus, and of course his take on it was, look, I'm not sure whether that's an AD's role as much as a coach's. He said, I'm not passing the buck, but that's a curious way to put it. But I think the portal and NIL are obviously on some level tied at the hip, right?
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
If you have the compensation, the resources available, it makes the portable very quickly a much more manageable thing, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of seeing kids fly out, you're going to see kids fly in and be added to your roster.
Or at least stay, right?
Or at least stay. That's right. So, yeah, I think those two things are forever linked.
And it's certainly going to be an evolving process that we will keep an eye on. Obviously, we're all waiting and kind of holding our breath here to see the decision that the university makes in what we think will be the next week or coming weeks here shortly.
It's a strange schedule.
It's a very strange timeline.
Right now, we're filming on Tuesday. We drop this on Wednesday. Well, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, Neil is sitting down with individual player meetings, okay, as is every other coach across the country. This used to be a very active recruiting week, a heavy recruiting week with the coaches on the road for a strong finish leading up to National Signing Day, which this year is on December 21st. Okay, but instead, the NCAA has stepped in and mandated a no contact quiet period on the recruiting calendar for the express purpose of putting coaches in position to do these meetings, conduct these meetings with their players, with their roster, so they can say, okay, what are your thoughts? Okay, here's our vision of where you fit in here. What's your vision? And it's not just the player guys, it's the player's inner circle, whether that's the player's parents, the player's uncle, the player's pastor, whoever it might be in their life.
High school football coach.
There you go. Okay, so it is a recruiting process completely revisited but in spades, in the sense that there's a different type of conversation in terms of, okay, here's what we can kind of do for you to take care of you. And then they're going to put out feelers to say, oh, that's not quite as much as school X, Y, or Z can do. So that's happening as we speak. So this is a big week in that sense. The portal window doesn't open until December 5th. A lot of people are confused on this because they say, well, can't kids transfer whenever? No, they can kind of bow out whenever.
Right. They can announce their intent to transfer.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Like you've already heard, for instance, Charles Woods, make announcements about what he's going to do, where he's going to do it. But that can't become official until the portal window opens. Now, one of the things they changed this year were these 2 windows, okay, to make it at least somewhat more quasi manageable. And the first one is a 6-week window from December 5th to mid-January, okay? So you're going to be seeing players come and go to get ready for the spring semester from December 5th. Buckle up, it's going to happen everywhere. And you're going to have every fan base in America arguing that their team's losing more than anyone else, because it's going to feel that way everywhere, right? So that's window number 1. Window number 2 is a 2-week window that takes place after spring ball, or right thereabouts, from May 1st to May 15th. So those are the 2 really high activity periods to keep an eye on. And we're buckling up for one right now. Like for instance, this is the time of year that I dive headlong into recruiting. Okay, I spend 3 weeks just buried in recruiting to get ready for our recruiting show on National Signing Day. So I know anything and everything about the flavor of gum that a prospect likes, because I don't want to learn about 200 kids and we sign 20 of them. I'm not going to spend the year doing that. But as we get closer, what I'll do is I'll narrow my target down to 35, 40, where it might be. And out of those 35, 40, I'm inside and out. I talk to high school coaches, I watch tape, and then we sign 20, 25, where it might be on a given year. Okay. Well, that process for me really starts like right about now. Okay. That's being impacted because it's very much in flux in terms of, okay, we know who we've been recruiting, but we don't know what sudden needs might emerge in the roster based on what does or doesn't happen with this window from the portal.
Sure.
So now you might, wham, all of a sudden be scrambling to, recruit, because that's technically what you're doing, somebody else out of the portal. But I'm tired of calling it crazy. It's different. And we're going to have to embrace
crazy,
it.
But
Here to
you're right.
stay. Okay. It's not going anywhere. If the Supreme Court had ruled 5-4, that might be a different conversation. But after watching the NCAA sit on its hands for 30 years and do nothing, not even make an overture toward change, the NCAA said, hey, we'll make the change for you. This is America. You can't stop these kids from doing that. How about a big 9-0 right in your face? And so what's happened is that struck the fear of God into anybody about doing anything that would even glance toward encroaching on player liberty, player movement, player freedom, because their fear is litigation. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with this. I don't know how it settles or lands, but it's very different.
It certainly is. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Vigo.
it's certainly crazy. I mean, you can take some aspects from the NFL, but it's going to be hard to because it's not the exact same thing. But they're going to have to basically have staffs, people on staff that do this. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, the recruiting stuff is going to be, there'll be a subdivision where they'll have, guys looking for dudes all the time. You know what I mean? And it's going to be, it's just going to, it's going to have to evolve because this is what we got right now.
Yeah, there's staffs, Owen, to your point, that kind of have general managers now, college staffs.
Yeah.
That is to some extent where this is heading.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very difficult to manage in the sense like I heard Mike Gundy, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. He said, this is heading to where we're going to have a scouting staff. Okay. Well, again, it doesn't fit as neatly as it does in the NFL, because in the NFL, it's structured in such a way as you send your scouts out. Okay. They gather all the information. They come back with your staff, with your GM, and you decide collectively, here's how we prioritize our targets. If that kid's available in round 1, round 2, round 3, we're taking that guy. Okay. You can't do that. It's not up to, in the NFL, it's up to the team who they pick. In college, it's up to the player who they pick. So it doesn't fit, just like Owen was saying, as neatly. So it's going to have to be some combination of all these different things. And we'd all be making a whole lot more money than we are if we'd figured it out by now, because all I know is this feels unsustainable. as it is now.
Yeah.
And it probably is unsustainable. Change will be forthcoming. The question is, what will that change look like, the continued change, before it finally settles? I'm very convinced, and I've said this many times, that we're going to be watching 30 for 30 type documentaries the rest of our lives about this crazy period in the history of college sports. Now, whether this period is a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But you hope that one day, way down the road, we're reflecting on this, because it's been called the Wild West. All right. Well, it's not the Wild West. It's not the Wild West at all. Okay. It's not the NFL, because it's not free agency. Free agency is dictated by contracts. It's not the Wild West. The Wild West had marshals and deputies. This has nothing. All right. This is a very unique, one of a kind thing, and there's nothing else like it. And we don't know where it's going. All we know is becoming more and more apparent that we have to amp up this NIL machine somehow, some way. And you kind of get the sense we're not squeezing blood from a turnip, okay, but maybe from a strawberry, right? It's, we're not going to be swimming in riches like some of these other schools we're trying to compete with in Texas or wherever it might be. But it's also been said that we don't have to compete with them. We kind of have to compete regionally with the schools we recruit against here, because they've studied this, guys, and they have it down to a science in terms of, okay, if you sign a kid, this data is readily available. If you sign a kid, his likelihood of transferring out is greatly dependent on how close to your campus he is. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the further you get from your campus, the greater the likelihood that he'll leave. So there has to be a certain radius, a certain window, okay, around your campus, whether that's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5, whatever it might be. They have data on all this, okay, that you specifically target. Because let's say you get a kid from, I'm just trying to think, southwestern PA, okay, that lives 45 minutes up the road from Morgantown, all right? Well, if you get that kid,
Dan Moses from Washington High School.
Well, there you go. There you go. Perfect. Okay. So if Dan Moses comes on board, at the modern Dan Moses, he might be less likely to transfer when wooed by other schools in other parts of the country because of that proximity to where he grew up. Okay. Whereas if you sign a kid from Texas or California or Florida, well, what ties do they really have to this part of the country, unless they, had an Aunt Sally that they grew up with in the summers, or whatever the case might be. So that's a strong consideration as you're recruiting. And don't think that, I know this is happening. Brian Kelly's doing this at LSU. Okay. He has his staff scouring the country. Okay. Because Louisiana is a very recruiting rich state, a talent rich state, very fertile recruiting ground. We all know that, right? So he has his staff scouring the country for Louisiana kids that somehow, some way landed on another roster, because that temptation is always going to be there. Hey, keep an eye on it. As soon as they hit the portal, or maybe in some cases, I'm not saying Brian Kelly does this, but we know some shenanigans go on. You can't stop a player from talking to a player, but that might be a tempting enough proposition to say, hey, come back home, play for the Tigers. It's not just a great brand, but you're an hour from home instead of a 6-hour flight or a 4-hour flight, where it might be. Okay. So yes, at the high school level, it matters from a recruiting standpoint, but it also matters at the portal level. So many moving parts to this. It's just a very different world that we find ourselves in.
There's no doubt about that. It's a whole new world, and it's obviously something we'll continue to discuss and dissect and keep an eye on here as it evolves nationally and obviously with WVU in Morgantown. A couple more here as we wrap up this headline segment. Jed, what is going on with the Rose Bowl?
Well, the Rose Bowl, this just in, is being stubborn. Okay. The granddaddy of them all doesn't want to let go of tradition. Now I get it. I'm a purist at heart, but at some point you got to cut the ties. All right. The game's moving forward and you don't want to be left behind. It's tied to the Rose Bowl parade. Okay. So what they're trying to do, first of all, the TV contract for the playoff deal extends beyond 2025. Well, what they're trying to do, the CFP and the TV partners with their bowl partners are trying to get this thing moved up and started as early as the 2024 season, this expanded 12-team playoff. Okay. Well, they need all 6 bowls on board to do that, voting in favor of it. Well, right now they have 5 of the 6. Guess who's the standout? The Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl is saying, all right, fair enough. We're willing to do that. We'll bump it up to 2024. But here's what we need in exchange for that. We need some consideration. We need a semifinal game at least twice every 3 years, guaranteed to be at the Rose Bowl, because what they're trying to do, they're trying to maintain that January 1st, 5 p.m. kickoff time that's tied around, the Rose Bowl parade. Okay. Sure. The Parade of Roses. So what's finally happened? Now you're looking at it. They're running out of time. Cities are trying to do prep work for the possible changes. You got to plan these things way out. So they're running out of time and they're up against it from a window standpoint, from a timeline standpoint. So the CFP has said, look, we're not going to call this an ultimatum, but we need an answer. And they've kind of loosely given, again, this episode is supposed to drop on Wednesday, but maybe by the time it does drop, there'll be news. The quote unquote ultimatum has been loosely tied to Wednesday of this week, saying, look, Rose Bowl, we need an answer. We want you to be part of this and we need to move forward, but there's no guarantee you are part of this. There's been talk that they might even move to another bowl as the sixth bowl, maybe create another bowl, maybe go with an existing bowl, whatever the case might be. Okay. Because what they're looking at, they've run the numbers and the financials on this. And if they don't get the playoff expanded by 24 in that early window, they could lose as much as $450 million. And they're not willing to do that just to give the Rose Bowl what it wants. So stay tuned. I'd say very soon you're going to hear one side or the other give. And I think that side's going to be the Rose Bowl. And they're finally going to have to cave and say, okay, fair enough. We want in. Here's what we're willing to do.
Wow.
Yeah, that is tough. That's wild. Wow.
Crazy.
I can't.
Power struggle.
Power struggle. I couldn't imagine the college football playoff and the New Year's Six without the Rose Bowl being involved if it actually got to that point. But hey,
some people have suggested, whether it's Herb Street, I've heard others, okay, maybe even Joe Klatt. I don't want to speak for other people, but I've heard some pundits suggest, how the College World Series is annually in Omaha. That's the destination, the landing spot. They've said, hey, the granddaddy of them all should be the landing spot each year. The college football national championship. Yeah. You're not going to get a strong argument out of me. I'd almost like to see it staggered East Coast, West Coast, maybe the Orange Bowl. Okay. Of course, the SEC people clamor for the sugar, but pick an East Coast venue because there's some great ones there as well. And maybe the Rose, but I wouldn't put up a strong argument against that. It seems unlike anything else in so many different ways. So that would kind of make sense to me. And, maybe somebody should step forward and say, that's the concession. How about this? Instead of your 2 semifinals every 3 years, and your bowl, your
we'll just give you the national championship game.
Yeah, that's right. A
pretty good consolation prize there.
Yeah, I don't know if the other cities would be too keen on that, though.
Well, I don't know if the capacities. I mean, as this evolves, dude, you're talking a lot of money to those bowl games.
Absolutely,
a lot of money, son. So you're going to want to. It's basically. The bowl games are going to be 6 mini Super Bowls, and then you got a natty daddy.
The coolest thing about it, Owen, to me, is the home site venues in that first round. To me, that's the coolest part. Before you get to the bowl structure part of it, those early games being played, you can have an SEC team going north to a Big Ten.
Yep, that's cool.
That would be that's what I'm most looking forward to. And again, I think, and this is something we'll spend a lot of the offseason talking about, the possibilities in and around the playoff expansion. But I think we're heading toward a world where what used to be a giant ceiling shattering moment for West Virginia would be what you guys did in the Sugar Bowl. Okay. You went down against the SEC champs and knocked them off in their front door, really. Okay.
That was a home game for them for sure.
That's right. The new version of that might be maybe you go to Outson Stadium in Eugene in the first round of the playoffs and knock off a highly ranked Oregon team. Yeah. That might be the new version of something as big as the Sugar Bowl win. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. No, it might not be a championship. It might be a playoff win on the road or something,
I know college football is having its struggles right now, but I love college football. They will figure it out. We're just going to have to deal with these growing pains as we go.
Yeah.
As a college football fan, you can love it or leave it. It doesn't really matter, but hopefully they find that sweet spot that makes college what it really is, by being able to, put a little money in the kids' pockets, but they need to do it the right way. Like I've said the whole time, man, if it was like a 401 retirement plan kind of deal that just like banked into it or something, I feel like that would be, I don't know, the easiest way. You know, I mean, there's 1,000 different things, but it would
There
just
are
be
1,000. The basic issue, and every time I try and formulate my idiot version of some solution, I always shoot it through this filter. Okay. You can't have a conversation acting as though the players are some type of employee per se. And this is all about what is the value of their individual name, image, and likeness to company X.
Yeah.
And you can't put a cap on that. Okay. You can't say, hey, you're only worth this much, because company X might say, oh, what are you talking about? No, they're worth this much. So you can't even say by position, you're worth this, by team, you're worth this, because it might take one fly in the ointment to jump in and say, no. That left guard for Washington State, for whatever weird reason, is worth this to us. So we're going to pay him this. So it's your name, image, and likeness. It's not the overall. In other words, your small piece in the greater picture of college football. We all get X amount. You can do that, sure, but you can't cap what individually they're worth. And that's where you get into, there are Title IX considerations.
It's not so much the cap, dude. It's the guys who aren't getting paid at all.
Yeah. Okay.
And some guys driving around in a new car, or this, and this. Like, there's going to have to be, listen, as a player, I would go back and play. I'd do the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if there ever was a play I gave up on, I'd give it 110%, whatever. But the thing is I don't know how long it'll sustain in a team where you got a bunch of guys making a couple $100,000, and the quarterback's getting 500,000 or $1 million, and the guys up front aren't getting shit. You know what I mean?
Well, it happens in the NFL.
Okay, buddy, they're all getting paid.
They're all
getting what I'm saying.
Well, here's what
paid. They're not making no
there's
money.
There's minimum salaries.
What I want to see, Owen,
you know what I'm saying?
I don't understand why there's not more kids thinking outside the box. Maybe there aren't, I just haven't heard of it. Like, let's say you're a starting right guard, or let's say you're a starting Will backer. Okay, you're not all conference or anything, and let's say you start for somebody. You're a starting Will backer for Nebraska, and you're from some small town in Minnesota. Okay, I'd like to see that kid, because everybody in that town knows who that kid is. He's playing in Nebraska. He's a big deal, right? Heck, go to 2 or 3 restaurants in town and make sure your family never pays for a meal ever.
Yeah, no, okay? Absolutely. I mean,
that's payment. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want to see more. When NIL started, that's kind of what I thought I would see, is a bunch of small deals and a couple giant ones.
Yeah,
a bunch of creative. Hey, go make a couple bucks on your own. That's not our job, right? Yeah. You got to go pedal yourself. I'm not here to pedal you, right? Yeah. Bijan Robinson had people come to him, all right? And the fact that every other people don't have people coming to them, that's not on us. That's on them.
Yeah.
Seek it out. Go find the money. Yeah. Somebody values you. If you're a starting athlete at a Division I school, somebody values you.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I remember years ago, there was a point guard for the women's basketball team at WU. Her name was Christy Cooper. I'm dating myself. This is 30 plus years ago. I played against her cousin, Rod. He was a pitcher at Circlesville in high school, really good pitcher. But, she was kind of a big deal. And I'm thinking, if NIL existed back then, I mean, are you telling me there aren't some cool businesses around Morgantown that would have tethered to Christy Cooper? Yeah, of course they would have. Or even back in Circlesville. And who knows what it might have been. Maybe she gets a free car from the local dealership, whatever it might be, if you have somebody out there selling you to them. I mean, that's what I'd like.
Well, you're talking about an agent, right?
A quasi agent, somebody like I said.
Jed's speaking like a real salesman here. You could tell this guy's got sales background. Hey, just go sell yourself.
I don't understand why people aren't doing it. I mean,
there's such value
being left on the table by these kids.
Buddy, I would have had Budweiser.
Owen would have been knocking on the gates.
I want Budweiser for life.
There you go. See, that's what I wanted to say. I want to see more of those little pizza deals.
It's true. I mean, I don't think those maybe are even I don't know. Who knows? You know what I mean? If I was a local business in town, in my opinion, you want those type of people in your establishment, whether it's just in the afternoon or
Yes.
whatever. But that's good business for you.
It brings people
And
in.
huh?
It brings people in.
Yeah. So I mean,
It's a
you
good
know,
look.
if you know that guy always goes to that spot because that's kind of like his, place because they
Well
take
said.
care of him. You know what I mean?
Well said.
It's kind of a celebrity thing for sure. I mean, at least local level celebrity.
Absolutely. And it doesn't,
Which
you don't have to be some Bijan Robinson type guy
no,
or
you
Bryce
don't.
Young. If you play Division I college football, you're big in someone's eyes. There's
Yeah.
value to you. Okay. And, I always joke that if NIL was around when I was playing at Glenville, okay, our barbers, we had a barber shop in the Foodland Plaza called Righty and Lefty. Okay. That wasn't their name. We just, one was on the right, one was on the left. And look, I'd have gone into Lefty and said, hey, I'll mention you all the live long day and tell everybody around town, if you give me a free haircut, whatever you need. Now, righty would have told me to go to hell, but lefty might have gone for it, right? So I'd at least got a free haircut out of it.
Or you go to lefty and you say, "Hey, I got a hell of an offer from righty over here," and then you go back to righty. I got a hell of an offer from lefty over here.
Right.
What do you got for me?
See, who's the salesman now? See, okay,
who's the salesman now.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this up. This has been a long headline segment. It is obviously it's coaching carousel season. There's been a ton of firings and hirings. Let's hit these quickly. I'm going to throw a couple of these around. We'll give some thoughts. We'll start in the home state of the beer truck. Owen, Luke Fickell to Wisconsin. A little bit of a surprising one. I think it's a great hire, but I just didn't see that coming.
Great hire. I was watching some of the interview of the press release when they at the hiring, and what he's done at Cincinnati. Great job, obviously. Wisconsin wants a guy who wants to play for championships. You know what I mean? And I think this is just my opinion. They recruit very well. Madison's a cool hip town. It's a cool university. I think there needs to be some maybe upgrades in some facilities, possibly. That'll probably end up happening. I think he's good to kind of give some spirit back to the team. I know a lot of the guys were bummed. You heard Jimmy Leonard's name around a lot because the players were really pushing for him to be the head coach. So does he stay on the staff? Does he not? That's kind of a staple. He's bled, red and white, been a Badger through and through his whole career. So he's, do I stay or do I go somewhere else and try to advance my career? Luke could comment on that, and who knows what's going to happen. I'm excited to see. They got a very good football team, and I feel like they're a lot better than the average run of the mill Wisconsin they've been in the past. So I'm looking to see what ends up.
The situation, what reminds me of? You have a defensive oriented guy, his pedigree's on that side of the ball, and Luke Fickell comes from Cincinnati. Okay, so the question is, does he retain the standout, exceptional, hot young D coordinator? He's a defensive guy himself.
Yeah.
So is he going? It reminds me, Wes. This encroaches into steps into your world. It reminds me of Mike Tomlin getting hired in Pittsburgh as a Tampa 2-4-3 guy, yet retaining Dick LeBeau, who was all about the 3-4 defense, right? So I always said that was maybe one of the wisest decisions Tomlin ever made. Does Luke Fickell make a similar decision with Jim Leonard? That's very interesting. And the other point, I've only heard this at the rumor level. Now that Cincinnati is open, what are the names I heard rumored? And it's very interesting, and it makes sense if you think it through.
Pat Narduzzi.
Matt Campbell. An Ohio guy.
Yep.
Okay. Cincinnati now going to the Big 12. If you can win at Iowa State in the Big 12, okay, you should be able to go back home to the Buckeye State at Cincinnati and recruit well enough there and that fertile recruiting ground to win in the Big 12 as well. But again, that's just a rumor.
Man, that's crazy.
That would be wild.
That would be really crazy.
Yeah. Crazy time of year. Black Monday's right behind
us. Certainly is. Speaking of crazy, Jed, your thoughts on Hugh Freeze to Auburn?
I always say this, Auburn's first question in the interview process, my buddy did the math the other day. Now with the Hugh Freeze deal approaching $40 million at 39, I think he's making 6.5 a year. They're paying 3 coaches $70-some million at the same time. 2 of them not to coach. Okay. So the only thing I'm certain of is Hugh Freeze will be fired. Or anybody else they would have hired. They're going to fire him. Okay. So I always
unless they would have hired Nick Saban, right?
Well, they might be the only school that ended up firing him. Okay. So here's what I'll say. The first question asked by Auburn in the interview process to any kind of potential coaching candidate as their head coach, you know what the first question should be? What makes you the next coach we should trust with our buyout money? That should be the first question. Or if you're on the other end, if you're the coach and you step into the interview, okay, and the Auburn chancellor, whoever's involved, the president, the AD on the line, they say, hey, give us your vision. What do you see in the future here? What do you see 2, 3, 4 years from now? I think the coach, the prospect, should respond by saying, well, here are my plans for the buyout money. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take your buyout money and I'm going to do, that's what they should do. This is just turning $70-some million to 3 coaches. I know some higher ups that are from the booster side at Auburn. Okay. Long story. But one of the ones I talked to wanted Dion. And here's why. He's like, look, it's rinse and repeat. We're hiring the same guy every time and firing him. It's just different versions of the same guy. At least Dion's different. If you're going to spend that much money and pay $70-some million to 3 coaches, 2 of which you're not paying not to coach, roll the dice on a guy like
swing
Dion
for the
who's
fences.
nothing like any of them.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, that's probably what was going to happen anyway. The only question with Hugh Freeze, and it's not to say he's not a good coach. I think he's a great coach. He's a quality coach. He's demonstrated he can get it done in the SEC, did a great job at Liberty. He was making $5 million a year at Liberty. $5 million a year at Liberty. So he's only making 6.5 at Auburn only compared to the 5 at Liberty. I'm not so sure I would have done that if I was him, but it's interesting when you look at it. Irrespective of what he does, they fire coaches when they win national titles. They fire coaches after they go unbeaten. There's something dysfunctional about that. Now I get it. You're, as Rick, Neuheisel likes to say, you're handed a pickaxe and a parka and told to climb Mount Saban. Well, that's true. Nowhere more is it true than right down the road at Auburn, okay, on the plains, than it is anywhere else in the SEC. But the question is, will he struggle and get fired, or will he be your typical Auburn coach? A lot of them have struggled and then got through it, win 10, 11 games, and then struggle again and get fired. I don't know the answer, but
it'll be interesting.
May God have mercy on Hugh Freeze's soul.
Well, it's always interesting.
Congratulations, brother!
You
just hit the big one.
There you go. He's about to take. Here in a few years, he's going to assume what you call the best job in America. Fired
football coaches of America. Yeah, well, speaking of fired football coaches of America, Matt Rule, he had about 800K reasons a month not to work, but he's landed once again in a high-profile job to Nebraska. I like this for Matt Rule. What he was able to do with the Temple program, an incredible turnaround there. He ended, if you look at Temple's history, half the time they've been ranked in the modern era, it was under Matt Rule. He was able to get them moving in the right direction real quick. Baylor, he went the first Power 5 program ever to go from 1 win to 11 wins. Matt in a span of 2. It's been very impressive. So
Matt Rule's an impressive coach.
He's an impressive coach. He is. It didn't work out for him at the NFL level, but that's happened to plenty of guys. Nick Saban didn't work out at the NFL level.
I think Nebraska needs to temper their expectations and appreciate the reality that the world they're trying to return to no longer exists. Okay. The Tom Osborne world of national championships every handful of years and 10, 11 wins every year. Okay. Here's the way I see Nebraska's ceiling. And I'm not casting aspersions here on, so don't throw anything through the screen at me. I think their ceiling is Wisconsin's ceiling. And that's fine. Wisconsin's a high quality football program. Okay. But when they left the Big 12, they lost their lifeblood recruiting connection to the state of Texas. They fundamentally were changed forever. Okay. They lost those Texas kids, playing in Big Ten country. They're no longer getting those Texas kids, much less to the extent they once did. So they can win. And I think Matt Rule will win. He's a great football coach, but maybe not to the extent Nebraska expects them to. I think Nebraska is sitting there. They can turn the clock back to 1994. I just don't see that. Unless I'm missing something, I just don't see it. I think they're going to be highly competitive, probably even contend for a title or two within the Big Ten. But I, things have changed.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think who knows, maybe this is the move that finally kind of makes them accept that hey, we can be good, we can contend, and maybe, once in a decade we will have a team that's good enough to be in the college football playoff conversation. But I tell you what, from Nebraska's standpoint, this feels like a pivotal. I mean, if this doesn't work out, right? I mean, if you go from Scott Frost, the guy who is an alumni of the university who had it all going right at UCF.
Oh.
You go to Matt Rule, who was dynamite at Temple and dynamite at Baylor. If this doesn't work, where do you go from here if you're Nebraska? I mean,
when Brian Kelly took the Notre Dame job, people asked me, do you think he can win there? And I said, here's my simple answer. If Brian Kelly can't win at Notre Dame, you no longer can. I'm going to say the same thing about Matt Rule at Nebraska.
Right.
If Matt Rule can't win at Nebraska, you no longer can.
I think that's very well said. Some other ones here. We got to wrap this up. This has been a long headlines segment, but David Shaw steps down at Stanford after a long tenure there. A lot of success early. Last couple years have been okay, but a lot of success for him early. Formerly of this parish, Jake Spavital out at Texas State. Obviously, he was an OC under Dana there for the Will Grier years. Willie Taggart's out at FAU. Philip Montgomery's out at Tulsa. Marcus Arroyo at UNLV. Yes.
Arizona State, I should say.
Arizona State. Yep. So we'll obviously continue to keep an eye on these. But it's coaching carousel season and some big names, some big happenings across the college football landscape here. I think that's it, right? I didn't miss anything, did I?
No, you got it. Like I said, Kenny Dillingham, new head coach at Arizona State. But stay tuned. I mean, again, this drops on Wednesday. 2 or 3 things could change between us taping tonight. Yeah.
No doubt. Let's get to our first break here. We come back on the other side. We'll take a look at the predictions and projections that we make every single week. And we'll get to our Oklahoma State preview here as well, too. You are in the gun.
I'm talking with J.R. Toothman of Toothman Ford. J.R., everybody knows a lot of pro athletes buy from you. What's the secret?
Just like Will Grier, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, James Washington, and many more pros, these guys have financial advisors that are always looking out for them to save time and money, and that's why they always shop at Toothman Ford.
And what if you're like us regular folks that don't have people giving us advice?
You don't need a financial advisor. Toothman Ford will save you time and money no matter who you are. Plus, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy from us. Visit toothmanford.com and get a quick, instant cash offer.
That sounds like a score to me.
That's right. And as always, we'll take anything in trade from chicken wings to Super Bowl rings.
Toothman Ford's got a lot of fans. Here's another one, Dallas Cowboys QB Will Grier.
This is Will Grier, former West Virginia and current NFL quarterback. And cars really do cost less in Grafton at Toothman Ford.
That's a fact, Will. Thanks. You can shop online anytime at toothmanford.com.
Let's go, Mountaineer fans. You're tuned in to In the Gun with Wes, the Runaway Beer Truck, and the Signalcaller.
Back in the gun here, it's time to take a look back at the final regular season week of the college football season. Of course, it was rivalry week. There's always, even in the changing landscape of conference realignment, where a lot of our favorite rivalries have gone by the wayside or maybe aren't, Thanksgiving weekend like they always were, kind of like with us with the backyard brawl. Rivalry week, always one of the biggest weekends across college football. We'll pull up the graphic now. Jed, how did we do?
Again, I'm going to post this on our Twitter account on social media at In the Gun Podcast as well, because it's 10 games to talk about. I'm going to fly through them pretty quickly, so you'll be able to revisit it on the Twitter account. Mississippi State, Ole Miss. We picked Ole Miss 34-31. Mississippi State pulled the upset 24-22, and boy, did Lane catch flack for that. The Fighting Gibbies pulled the big win in overtime. We were watching that Friday night at dinner. We were tracking that football game when we were out in Oklahoma. Florida State, we projected a 10-point Seminoles win. They won 45-38. Georgia won 37-14 after we predicted 48-13. Michigan, Ohio State, this one. Ohio State, we projected 33-24 over Michigan, but Michigan blew the doors off in 45-23. South Carolina upsets Clemson 31-30. We projected Clemson 31-17. Bama blows out Auburn. We projected 35-13. The actual score 49-27. Oregon State over Oregon. This changes the whole complexion of the Pac-12 title game.
Yes, it does.
We projected a Oregon win. We projected USC by 6 over Notre Dame. They won by 11. And then finally, wrapping it up, we projected Washington over Washington State by 2 in a close one. But Penix went off, and they won 51-33 in the Apple Cup.
The Apple Cup. Gotta love it. I think that's one of the more underrated college football rivalries. Remember last year, when Washington State stormed Washington's field?
Yes.
That's my goal, boys. I need to storm Acrisure Stadium after a WVU win there one of these days. I tell you what, that would be biblical. In the conference, Jed, final regular season week. Let's pull up that graphic now, and what are we looking at?
Full slate, 4 games. We'll get to ours here after a bit. We projected Texas 31-24 over Baylor. They won 38-27. We projected TCU to finish 12-0, 28-17 over Iowa State. Ooh, they finished 12-0 all right, 62-14. They made it look like Paul Rhodes was in charge of Iowa State. Texas Tech and Oklahoma. We projected a 33-31 Texas Tech loss, Oklahoma win, but instead the Red Raiders 51-48 in a shootout. That was a heck of a game. I got to watch some of that as well. K-State, we projected 37-24 over Kansas in the Sunflower Classic. 47-27 was the actual score. So a lot of good action in the Big 12 closing weekend of the regular season.
It'll be a all-purple Big 12 championship game this weekend. Yeah, it was a crazy weekend. It was a crazy year across the conference. It really was. But TCU able to put that final. Maybe they've crossed their T, but now they need to dot the I in the in the championship game to put it all together. And it certainly is against Kansas State. Now, those are the projections that we make every week. We also make individual predictions. We will, in our next episode, we got 2 episodes dropping this week, keeping that content coming for you guys. So we'll have a full standings update and showdown and maybe a little trash talk banter there in our next episode as well, too. But Jed, Signal Caller of the Week, where you predict which quarterback in the conference will throw for the most yards. Pulling up the graphic now. Where'd you land?
I picked Texas Tech's Tyler Shuck to throw for the most yards, and he threw for 436 yards, which was the second most by any Big 12 quarterback in any game this year, right behind the most, which was in the same game. So I finished second with a guy that threw for 436 yards and didn't play most of the second quarter. Okay. They inserted Donovan Smith for some curious reason.
That's right.
So I ended up with 4 points. Dylan Gabriel, who I picked last week, and threw for 224 yards in the first quarter and ended up with 259. I just tossed the talent. I got 4 points for it.
Oh, Owen tells us every single week his runaway beer truck of the week. Of course, which running back will rush for the most yards in the conference. Owen, one final time, your love affair with Deuce Vaughn. How did he do you?
Well, he had an all right game. He 147 on the ground. All right, but that wasn't good enough because old Bijan Robinson's been tearing it up lately here, son. Golly. That boy's
he's putting some mustard sin on his final half of the season.
79 yards. Did you hear what they said about him? He's making a couple $1 million in NIL money.
Yeah,
that's what. I don't even know how they definitively say these things, but they said there's the possibility that instead of entering the draft, okay, he might approach Texas and say, "Hey, get me to 6-7 million. Maybe I'll stick it out another year." Think about that.
Oh my God!
I'll believe that when I see it. That's just
the Oscar.
Conjecture.
That's the Oscar Sheboy.
But exactly. But
Oscar Sheboy is making $2.5 million at Kentucky this year. That's why he didn't go to the NBA.
Bijan is the best back in the draft. The only problem is his position isn't prioritized like it used to be, but he's still probably a first round pick. He's a Najee type first round pick.
Yeah, he's back at 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. Or he could slide into the second, depending on how the running backs go. But to Owen's credit, okay, He texted me. Now, he probably doesn't remember this because he was beside himself with the spirits, but he texted me. And at the time, Deuce Vaughn just caught an 80-yard pass, and he starts talking smack. And he's like, oh, he's going off. He's going to do that. I said, receiving yards don't count. And he came back.
That is true.
Now, at the time, Deuce had like 30-some rushing yards. Well, Owen said, he's going to run for 150.
He's getting hot. Yep.
He told me that. And at
close.
the time, he had 30-some yards. He said, he's going to run for 150
didn't.
tonight. And I thought, oh, no, he's not. He's going to get 100. He 147. You were almost spot on with that.
Oh, dude, that kid is so electric. He's so much fun to watch. But
Yes,
it was really it was cool to see both them running backs. We got some good backs in this league, honestly.
Yes, we do. I was thinking
Certainly
that.
do.
Your job's hard. And all our jobs are going to get harder next year with 14 teams.
Oh, baby.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, if Deuce Vaughn goes into Canton one day, I think Owen should be the one to enshrine him and be fair.
Or Devin Neal.
I give you the Big 12 defense of the week every single week. And folks, I done it again. Just call me Aaron Judge. All right. I'm just out here dropping bombs, as you can see from the graphic that we'll pull up now. I told you last week, I said TCU. Listen, Iowa State, last in the conference, not much to play for other than pride. TCU, everything to play for. I thought it would be ugly. It was ugly. They gave up just 14 points. That was the fewest in the conference. WVU second with the 19 allowed on the road in Stillwater. But I'm finishing up strong here, much like the Mountaineers. And
You know
TCU.
what this feels like, Owen? The week before the 07 pick game. We've talked about it. You guys played.
Did you have to bring
your
this?
most
This has been going so well. Why'd you have to bring that up?
Right?
I mean, geez.
That's what that game felt like. That TCU Iowa State game felt like the UConn game in 07. So what does that mean this week for K-State TCU? I don't know. That's what that game. I was watching it on the plane.
I'm just saying.
That's what it felt like.
Deuce Vaughn, he's going to go off in that game. He's going to go off versus TCU. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm also saying it's now maybe there's some LaShawn McCoy parallels there, but that Pitt team wasn't nearly as good as this Kansas State.
No.
That's what I'm saying, son.
But hey, you know what? That Pitt team had a higher ranked defense than this Kansas State team. 5th in the country.
Let's just stop.
It's kind of a bait game because they have to win this game. It's a must win for TCU, obviously.
Yeah, that's the question. Do they? I'm almost convinced if they lose, they already beat Kansas State to begin with. So they're the only team in the playoff race that's beaten every team in their conference. I think they could lose and still go.
Well, it depend on what else would happen, but
I'm not sure if it depends on what else happens. I think they could lose and still go.
I think they need to win because that's a great representation of what we're all about this year. Big 12 needs
here's what I would like to see. I'd like to see them lose, get in, then upset some people.
Yeah.
Lose to K-State, still get in, which I think they will. If it's close, if they get blown out, they're out. Okay. But if it's a 10-point game, I think they're going to the playoffs. They already beat K-State once. I don't know how you keep them out.
That's interesting.
Well, you keep them out because they're TCU. They're not Texas or Oklahoma.
Once again, they were kept out the last time because the CFP was scrambling. Oh, no, the Big Ten's not represented in the playoff.
The first playoff can't have that.
Because the Big Ten Conference isn't represented. Well, now the Big Ten and the SEC are represented. The same scenario doesn't exist.
Unless Michigan loses to Iowa.
They'd still go. Michigan would still go.
I think you're right. They would. Yeah.
I heard somebody say this week, a compelling case can be made that the unbeaten teams lose and still get in. All three of them.
Well, Georgia 100%. That would be crazy. We'll keep an eye on it here as it all plays out. Obviously, it'll be an exciting Saturday, gentlemen. You get United States in the round of 16 at 10 a.m. on Saturday against the Dutch, against Netherlands, and that rolls right into a full slate of conference championship games. BetOnline.ag if you're trying to get your action, and make sure you got the cold ones ready because it's a full slate on Saturday, baby. We're gonna take a break here. When we come back on the other side, we will,
baby. We got the standings coming out in an episode upcoming.
Yeah. I said that earlier, but you're right.
Here's what I wanted to add, Wes. We're also going to flesh out some numbers behind the standings. It's kind of interesting.
Okay.
Like what we average, what were our highs.
Jed,
It's kind of interesting.
Jed, we know you're gonna flesh it out, partner. All right. If there's
Oh, yeah.
if there's data points to be found,
Yes.
if there's
Yes.
data points to be found, you will find them. That is for sure. When we come back here, it's Okie State recap time. Mountaineers finish the season on a high and are crowned Oklahoma State champions in the process, brother. We'll discuss it all when we return. You are in the gut. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter @InTheGunPodcast.
Game day got you on the go? We get it. Mart is here to keep you going all season long with stores throughout our home state. We're a proud West Virginia-owned company, and our friendly staff is committed to serving our communities. From fuel to freshly brewed coffee and snacks, a stop at Mart to cover your game day needs is always a touchdown. Plus, Mart Rewards members earn points with each purchase to redeem for discounts on gas and free items. So stop by, start saving, and stay on the go with Mart.
Mountaineers go out on a high with a victory in Oklahoma State against a team that we had not beaten in a very long time, against a team that was on a, I believe, 14-game home winning streak. Correct, Jed?
Yep. Longest in school history.
Longest in school history that the Mountaineers were able to snap there, ruin senior day down there in Stillwater. Before we get into the good, the bad, the pivotal moments, all of that, let's pull up our final projection graphic. Jed, I got to think we probably got this one wrong.
Yeah, and this is my favorite part of the week, being wrong with this, right? Yep. We projected again, just based on the point spread, West Virginia was a heavy underdog, a 37-28 Oklahoma State win. But as we know, the score in the real world, the only one that counts, West Virginia 24, those Cowpokes 19. There we go.
Oh, good to go out. It is a weird dynamic, right? Where if you would have told me before the season started, we're going to be Baylor, the defending conference champions, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, right? The top three teams from the Big 12 last year. You're going to split. Tech. You're going to split with your rivals on the road, right? You play Pitt and Virginia Tech on the road. You're going to split that. I've been like, all right, we might win 8. We might win 8 games here, 9 games here. Yeah. Obviously did not go that way, but you do end it for the seniors. You end it on that positive note as you do head into the offseason here. Jed, always after a victory, we'll start with the good. What stood out to you?
This was such a strange, situation, environment. Guys, I've never seen this happen. It all started off, first of all, the first half, the rain was maybe like the Baltimore-Maryland game. Okay, the Maryland game in Baltimore, I should say.
Where was it at compared to Oklahoma? And
okay, the second half was the worst. It surpassed Oklahoma, not the first half, but it rained the whole first half. It was just steady, kind of like it was the Maryland game in Baltimore or the Dustin Garrison Bowling Green. Okay, yeah. It was one of those. But the second half, get out of town. It poured the whole second half.
Yeah, you could tell on the TV copy. I was like, oh my God, it's really coming down.
And you're right. When you can see it like that on TV, yes. it's coming down.
Yeah. Yes, I had what I call my scuba coat underneath of my winter coat, which is semi-water repellent. My winter coat is. My winter coat probably gained 30 pounds. The coat underneath my winter coat gained 10. I mean, it's still wet upstairs. I posted my my media pass on Twitter.
I saw that.
That was just from wearing it outside my coat. I mean, anyway, the game started. I'm out there with the captains for the coin toss. I've never seen this happen. The official just call it in the air. Did you see it? The coin stuck
I was
on
listening.
the side in the turf.
I was
No
listening to
way.
you. I was
Yes.
listening to you and Tony do the call.
Guys, I was trying to get my camera out in time to get a picture of it, but he's like, "Hey, how about we do that again?" I was like, "Well, that time he picked it back up." I mean, it was this strange dynamic. I don't know if the rain was affecting the turf, but out in the center, we were on the Oklahoma State logo. It's in the middle of the field, obviously. The turf seemed to stick up straight and be a little higher than anywhere else on the field because it hadn't been beaten down for whatever reason. But so strange.
That's you couldn't do that again if you tried.
No, you
That's
couldn't.
crazy.
And so anyway, if I'm looking at the good, there was plenty to look at. I'd say, speaking of the weather, we handled the weather, which was very adverse. We handled the adversity of the weather. I mean, we only get 10 footballs. Okay. So by the second half, especially the fourth quarter, it's tough to take care of those footballs. And I'll say one of the game balls should go to our ball boys, because as wet as our balls were, they dropped some balls on the Oklahoma State side. Quit laughing, though. Grow up. Okay, look at it. Here we go.
Hey! It's our show. It's our show motto. All right, chisel it in stone. It's the mission statement of In the Gun podcast. You're only young. Said. You're only young. Well, that's our vice. That's our vice president. Here's our mission statement in the Gun podcast. You're only young once, but you can be immature forever.
There you go. So Oklahoma State was dropping a bunch of footballs. Okay, they were, every time you turn around, they dropped 3 or 4. One of them came to the sidelines, and he threw it to the ball boy. You know, before he put it away, I said, "Hey, let me see that." Right after the guy dropped it, I don't remember which receiver it was, and he handed me that, and I was like, "That thing is soaked," and somehow it was far wetter than ours. So I'm like, "Hey, hats off to our ball boys, because they did a better job. Whatever Oklahoma State was doing wasn't as effective as ours." But the young quarterbacks handled the adversity. They handled the weather. There was only 1 turnover in those conditions. That's ideal. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of exchanges. A lot was thrown at him, not just Garrett, but Nico, managing the offense, setting the table. Okay. There were a lot of motions. People take these things for granted. Okay. There's a lot of thought and coordination that goes into that. I've had to set the table with motions and shifts and things like that while you're monitoring the defense, while you're mindful of the assignments on the offense. The quarterback's sitting there thinking, all right, I need to know what all the other 10 guys are doing. I need to set them where I need them to go. I need to time up the motion and account for what's happening defensively. I mean, I think of 1 4th and 1. Okay. The 4th and 1 that we converted from inside our own 30, like at a 29, that Jalen converted. You guys remember that? He picked up 2 yards on it. Well, there was motion on that, and we were late getting the play in, and it was a race against time to set the motion, get Sam James across the formation, and get the ball snapped before the play clock went out, and Nico did it. Now, Sam helped him because he recognized the crisis and kind of took off as Nico was getting ready to prompt him. So great job by the quarterbacks in doing that. You have to appreciate what the offensive line did, especially the run game in the second half. Not just Jalen, but both quarterbacks. I mean, we know what Garrett is. Garrett's dynamic. Garrett's explosive. Garrett brings another dimension. Nico's a big physical kid. I mean, he's 225 pounds. He's a handful. Okay. So when you pump him up through B gap, that's not an easy assignment. And he runs pretty fearlessly. So those 6, 7, 8 yard gains he got a couple times, I mean, those were pretty meaningful. But the O-line combined with the tight ends and the backs for that matter. I mean, I broke some tape down, put some stuff on Twitter. What a great job they were doing. I mean, you talk about, and you and I were tweeting back and forth, the stretch play. That's how you run the stretch play.
I love it.
Right? That's how you bang that thing. That's how you bend that thing. And we saw a little bit of both. You saw Jalen Anderson. He banged one and he bent the other one back inside, but great job of the offensive line. In one case, you had a 315-pound nose guard, defensive tackle, who started off on the left hash, and Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor escorted him 40 feet to the other hash on a stretch play. That's how you block a stretch play, okay? And then defensively, we've talked all year about the shortcoming of this defense. First of all, I give up too many big plays, right? But small ball, red zone defense, we've suffered by allowing far too many touchdowns inside the 20, what used to be a strength in previous years. Last year, we were number 1 in the Big 12 just a year ago, and allowing the lowest percentage of touchdowns in red zone. This year was the highest. Well, in this particular game, 4 trips into the red zone, including 3 inside the 10, okay? Just 1 touchdown. Oklahoma State had 3 trips inside the 10 that resulted in just 10 points, okay? So credit where credit's due. I ran the numbers. In the first 4 games of this year, the red zone touchdowns allowed by West Virginia were 82, 83%. In the last 5 Big 12 games, the first 4 Big 12 games, 80-some%. The last 5 Big 12 games, that number dropped to 53%. That's much more manageable.
Yeah, it's a big number.
As long as you don't break, okay, that's fine. Now, from a personnel standpoint, had to move some things around. For instance, Lee Koba, in the last 2 games of the regular season, 26 tackles, but he was starting to apply some pressure and be disruptive. Oh, and part of that was because Jarrett Bartlett didn't play. Okay.
He got a sack, didn't he?
He did, and here's why. Normally he's off the field when we go with that Rover package. Yeah. But because Bartlett didn't play, they kept Lee on the field in the Rover.
That's a good spot for him too, man.
That's right. I'm telling you,
I bet he likes that too, because he's got a lot of freedom.
We sacked that kid 4 times. We hurried him 15 times. A lot of them were in third down situations. So, there was a lot to like about this performance, guys.
No, it was an exciting game to watch. It was, I made a tweet after the game, those seniors getting to sing the fight song one last time. I mean, it's been a rough season, but to end on a win for a lot of those guys is a big deal. To end on a win for our confidence going into the offseason.
They're so hard to get. People that don't play don't understand how hard it is to win.
Yeah. And we're not, like you said, I was going
to say, you'll appreciate this. The locker room felt like we were 1-0.
Dude, I'm telling you right now.
It was just, winning
is
so,
like a good environment.
Yes. It's so hard to do it. And when you do it, that locker room, exactly like you're saying, Owen, it was so celebratory. I mean, you celebrate your achievements. It felt like we could have just easily been 1-0, okay, with everything ahead of us, because everybody was so happy to. That's how you feel anytime you win. Yep. Anytime you win, that's you can't put that in it. You can put
particularly the last one as well too.
Yeah, and like we don't really have anything to play for and whatnot, but we and here's the thing, we've talked about this all year, and when I look back at it, that's this team. We could be that good. We could win the games. It's just you got to be consistent. I mean, there's so many times you can dissect this, which we'll do, I'm sure, in the off season here, and I won't get too long winded. We'll dissect and we'll say, where the shortcomings were, where they weren't. Now that we've got all the tape and we have in these recaps, we're just dialing it back down a little bit and kind of fine microscoping it a little bit. But I mean, this team definitely has the fight. So, like we've said all along, Neil hasn't lost the locker room. These kids want to win.
Compare that to this, Owen.
It's just eliminating those mistakes and fine-tuning what we got,
A year ago, you had a friend of mine pointed this out to me this week. He said last year at TCU, you had a Hall of Fame coach in Gary Patterson with his statue standing outside the stadium, okay, who lost his team. Think about that. That's how easy it is to lose a team and lose a locker room, okay?
Oh, yeah. That
team wasn't fighting for Gary. And Gary is a Hall of Fame coach by any precept.
He's their Don Nehlen.
Absolutely is. Okay. So he lost that team. He lost that locker room. It's an easy thing to let it slip away. And what you're saying is true. Okay. You don't have a locker room lost and go out and come from behind and beat Oklahoma like we did. Punch back in the second half after a poor showing in the first half against Kansas State. Say what you want about the team, but you don't get on a plane, fly halfway across the country in those wretched, awful, cold, rainy conditions, okay? And trust me, I'm still wet, okay? You don't do that with no opportunity to play at a bowl game, okay? And knock off a winning streak the way we knocked it off unless you're fighting and battling. You don't do it. So say whatever else you want about the liabilities, the shortcomings, the deficiencies. Fair enough. But yeah, they fought and they fought hard, and they found a way to win that football game in a tough environment for a host of reasons.
Yeah. And some of those players that, we needed to step up, I think they started to emerge a little bit. And some of the young cats that got some PT, man, pretty good. So it's you know,
We have
28,
4 guys.
man, 28 being able to run that zone. I'm telling you right now,
That was pretty.
you live on it. You live on it, man. And if we got him coming back for 3 more years, you know what I mean?
Let's keep as many of them as we can keep, because
Yeah.
I put a tweet out this week. We had 4 different guys run for over 100 yards in a game this year.
Yeah.
The second most in the Big 12 was 2. We're the only team with more than 2, and we had 4. And they all had 119 or more. And that's not to mention Justin Johnson had 83 in a game against Virginia Tech. So that's a deep room. Hats off. We can't do the segment without talking about Chad Scott. What a great job Chad Scott does with that room, collectively with that room.
Yeah.
I mean, when you listen, even Jalen, like when we were in the press room with him afterwards and interviewing him, I mean, the things he's saying about the other guys in the room, it's just, there's it truly is a collective effort, and they celebrate each other's successes. I mean, from CJ to Jalen to Tony to Justin, they talk about all 6 guys in the room.
Yeah.
So we're going past the 4 deep. So yeah, a lot to be excited about in that room. Now, again, stay tuned. We recognize the reality of the new world. Here comes the portal. What are the odds of keeping all 4? I don't know, but I also wouldn't have thought we'd have kept 4 quarterbacks through the summer and through the spring into the fall, and yet we somehow did. So I don't know. I can't forecast what's happening, but you're right. Jalen, 3 more years of that guy, potentially more. Man, he has a different skill set.
Yeah.
All of them are a little different than one another, right?
Yep.
And Jalen's different than the other 3, but it clicked quickly with him with that stretch play.
Yeah, he's super patient, man. And when he hits it, he reads his hats real well. He's able to step a foot in the ground and go. That's what I really enjoyed watching him. I was like, man, he's going to have a lot of success if he gets on a team, or if this team, I mean, gets rolling.
Now, Nico's 2 for 9. Okay. But one of the things I asked him in the post game, I was like, look, collectively as a team, you're 10 for 23 passing, 4 of 15 third down conversions. Yet somehow you guys gutted it out and willed the football to be moved down the field when it mattered. I said, it kind of reminded me of that comeback, that legendary comeback that you had in high school. You're down 24-7 with 3 seconds to go. Okay. He comes back from behind on ESPN and wins that game.
Throws up on the football before he throws a touchdown
in the middle
pass.
Of the pass. That's right. And he said, I was just thinking about that the other day. And he said, that's what you got to do, because he's 2 for 9. But guys, one of those 2, I broke it down on tape. Wow. They brought a 6-man pressure. They're playing cover 1 behind it. The way he ID'd it, the way it was protected up front, they tried to fire through a gap to disrupt him. Zach did a great job. Tony Mathis did a great job. And he just stood tall like a grizzled vet and fired a dart to BFW on 3rd and 9 against the 4th-ranked third down defense in America. I'm like, whoa, that's big time. That was a big-time play.
The entire effort.
Good PT in there.
Yeah. The entire effort for me, guys, I don't know if you'll remember, couple years ago, though. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year. The Patriots beat the Bills in Buffalo, and Mac Jones completed 2 passes.
I remember that.
Oh, when they ran the ball the whole time.
Yeah,
it was like 14-10 or 14-13 was the final score.
Yes.
Mac Jones was 2 for 3, and the Patriots were able to win. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that terrible weather. Some of those same. Can't really throw the football. You got to assert your will and move a man from point A to point B and matriculate that ball down the field.
That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. I remember that game. Great analogy.
It was certainly fun to watch in that regard. I know any offensive lineman and even Owen, fullback kind of cut from that same cloth. Like there's few feelings like that, like moving that's somebody against their will. And you certainly saw that, I think, in spades from the offense. And
you saw how young Nico was, guys, in some ways, but in other ways, he looked so mature. Like I just walked you through that play that he made that looked like a 5th-year senior, right? But then, and this is just kind of neat. Okay, we're in the post-game press conference, waiting on other players to be deposited to the room. We don't know who's coming after we interviewed Neil. Well, Nico comes in, and I'm sitting up front of the table because the way I got to handle Tony's mic that's tied to my phone, and I got to hit record. So I can't go back and sit. I got to manage all this right next. So if you watch online, you'll see him interview. When they turn to the side, that's because idiot Jed's sitting next to him, just off camera. Okay. Well, I'm sitting next to Nico, and he sits down, and as he's getting ready, he still has his headsets around his neck. Of course, because he's a teenager, right? So he's sitting there thinking, he looks at me, he's like, wait a minute, I probably should take these off. He just has that look on his face, right? And it reminded me of my
doing
son.
this right?
You know what? Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, whoops. And I'm just thinking, I mean, what an adolescent thing that it just this neat little moment that I was like, yeah, he might seem mature beyond his years in some way, but he's still a teenager, right? And it was just kind of neat. So anyway.
That is cool. That is cool. What about the bad here, Jed? Right? Because there's always some of that. What do you got for us?
Slow start. You know, I mean, we had the early scoring drive. We put together a drive, but once again, you know, it had the flow of this game, and this is why it concerned me. It had the feel of the Iowa State game, right? And the halftime score was even the same at 10-7. It had that feel like the defense is shutting these guys down the way they should. Offense, you better make some hay, or the same thing's going to happen. That dam's going to break, and it's going to be too late. If you don't make the hay before the dam breaks, you're not making the hay, right? But coming off the field at halftime, Neil told me, he's like, we got to get the run game going. I mean, we've got to get the run game going. Well, look what happens in the third quarter, and that was the difference. The flow of this game alarmingly felt like it did in Iowa, at Ames, Iowa. So the slow start concerned me. 7 points at halftime, that concerned me. Missed tackles on the back end, okay? We had 8 missed tackles in the secondary alone. That's kind of been a shortcoming of ours in meaningful spots all year. When we're bad, it's because we're missing tackles in space, okay? We've lacked that efficiency. And maybe it's because we didn't have those battle-tested senior safeties that we kind of took for granted, and Sean Mahone, Alonzo Adai in previous years, for whatever reason. Okay. So the missed tackles were a problem, and they put Oklahoma State in position to make too many plays. And they had some guys streaking open, and good thing some of those balls were dropped, because potentially those were some big plays. One of them could have been a 90-yard touchdown that was dropped. Okay. Now it was somewhat of an errant throw thrown away at football, but and then the gaffes, there were just some straight up gaffes, like the play by Malachi Ruffin. You know, I mean, that was just, I mean, that's a Sports Center bottom 10. You know, I mean, he obviously, I didn't ask him, but it very much seemed like he thought the ball was incomplete. He thought that he had.
Well, that's exactly what he thought.
Yeah, he thought he had a pass breakup at PBU. So he's doing the incompletion swat, and the guy takes off. Like, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of that video you see of the lion who gets a hold of the Cape buffalo, and he has him down on the ground, and he's chewing away at him, and here come the other lions, and they're fighting the lion. Hey, let me have some of that buffalo. I'm going to take it. And he's like, get away from me. I'm eating the buffalo. Well, meanwhile, he gets distracted by the other lions in the middle of eating the buffalo. So he goes to fight the other lions, and the buffalo's like, I'm getting the hell out of here. So he just gets up and leaves. Well, that's what that receiver for Oklahoma State looked like. Well, okay, I'm just getting out of here. I'm just going to take off. And that's kind of what it felt like. So one of the strangest things, Coach Brown called it when I asked him in the post game what that was. He said, I can't explain the unexplainable. I don't know, But again, I can't say that without also mentioning, to Malachi's credit, he rebounded late in the game, because they really went at him. They went at him big, and he had 3 pass breakups late in that football game. So he was a big part of those last 2 defensive stops. So, yeah, that was the craziest play you'll ever see, and it was a low light of all low lights. But at the same time, that's how you finish after making a boneheaded play like that. At least bounce back and finish strong. And then Ollie Straw, do you remember the Michigan State game a few years ago? Michigan State, when the Australian punter. Well, again, it was an Australian
Sean McDonough's voice cracked like 7 times.
I'm thinking, can't these Australian guys catch the football? I know they can punt it, right? So, again, the ball was wet as all get out. And Oliver Straw has been the ultimate. He has developed into the ultimate weapon for this football team. I mean, I think he's one of the most pivotal parts of this team, all things considered. And for a guy that was kind of shaky through the summer into camp, we were still kind of in doubt. Hey, is he going to turn into what we hoped he'd be when we recruited him out of Australia, out of the academy, or is he not? Boy, has he ever exceeded any and he had some lofty expectations, but to drop that snap, that was another one. I mean, we got very fortunate. We were very fortunate, because they had some pump blocks on throughout the course of that game. But for whatever reason, that particular down, they had a return on. And not only did they have a return on, but the only two really intense punt rushers they had came from the opposite side. So that bought Ollie time to pick the football up, react, and get one off. Now, it wasn't a great punt, but it's a heck of a lot better than starting at the 15. So he got it up to midfield. So once again, if you're going to make a snafu like that, at least rebound and make a play. And he did. So I would point to some of the gaffes. That's all. There were a couple just head scratchers there.
Yeah, certainly were. Some of those, you talk about the missed tackles, you talk about the slow start, some of those maybe theme, bigger picture themes that we saw pop up a little bit this season. We'll do more of that conversation when we do a season review episode, maybe a season review, season rewind, something like that. We'll call it. We'll get to that eventually. We'll get to that eventually at some point. Let's wrap this up with pivotal moments, gentlemen. Of course, brought to you by our friends at High Street Prints. Make sure you're checking them out, highstreetprintshop.com, for all of your printing and merchandise needs. Of course, they do our merch, our gear at itgfootball.com. Hopefully you took advantage of our BOGO Black Friday sale last week. Who wants to go first here? Jed, you want to go first on pivotal moment? Or you want
me? I'll tell you what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with, it's really a combination of two things, and they're pretty obvious this week. It's the two runs by Jalen, but I'd especially point to the second one, okay? Because sometimes, and we saw this with our defense at Iowa State, if you miss a run fit, you kind of hand the other team a big play, right? So you're thinking that, okay, so we popped 150+ yard run. Okay, early in the game, what Garrett did was exceptional. Okay, but that was a different animal. When we ran that stretch play and popped the first 50+ yard run, you're thinking, all right, well, maybe that's a product of, we executed it well. We blocked it incredibly well. Jalen read it very well. But also, you never know if somebody maybe wasn't in the proper fit, okay, what can or can't happen. But any possibility of that being something other than just off the hook exceptional was, just a couple plays later with the second one. And that also proved to be the winning points, by the way, because that made it a 21-10 game after the PAT. So as it turned out, that's all we would need to win. But that second run, the sideline came alive with both of them. Trust me when I say that. But that second one in particular, now it was like, all right, this is our day. This is our game. We're leaning on you, and it's having an impact. Coach Brown told him at halftime, look, we're going to keep pounding against that wall. And eventually we're going to get our yards. And you started to see that materialize. So it was kind of proof of concept, right? When what your coach tells you, you start to see it play out and unfold in real time on the field. You're like, wow, he was right. This is working. So I'd say the second big run by Jalen to me was the turning point. But this is another one of those fun games that you could probably pick from 6 to 8. But yeah, you could for a host of reasons.
It's funny. You'll appreciate this. Like I have to really compartmentalize because it's tough. I do a Steelers show every single day. I'm at all the games. We do this WVU football podcast. So I have to, it's tough for me. Sometimes I'll get my signals crossed on, wait a second, am I remembering this? Wait, was this the Mountaineers? Was this on Sunday? Where did this happen? I have a notes in my notes app on my phone. I have a pivotal moment note where I'll jot down a couple possibilities because by the time we go to record, right, I've got a full Steeler game in my mind too. There's just a lot going on there. From Saturday, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different pivotal moments jotted down in my phone.
I'll tell you what, in 30 seconds, hit on 9 of them.
First quarter, bringing in Nico after the Garrett Green touchdown run. Second quarter, long Garrett Green run negated by Nestor Hold. Then on the next play, Caden Prather has a perfect screen and runs away from his blockers. Second quarter, 4th down stop near the end zone. Malachi Ruffin blunder, but with the defense able to hold to a field goal. Third quarter, going forward on 4th down after Garrett Green gets concussed. Big punt return by Preston Fox gets negated after offsides. You take a 65 yards as opposed to 8 yards, stopping them on the 2-point conversion. The Stills fumble recovery. And what I'm going to go with as my pivotal moment is the composure by Ollie Straw on the fire drill, on the blunder there.
Oh, yeah.
That's the final one I wrote down, and that's the one that I'm going with.
That's a good one.
Listen, for a fresh, I mean, this isn't a fourth or fifth or sixth year senior. This isn't a 22, 23, 24-year-old man like we've, like we have a lot of in college now, particularly with the extra COVID year. This is a freshman who, who just enrolled back in January, hasn't even, been a year in Morgantown, almost a year now, but hasn't even been a year in that weather, in that moment. For him to have the composure to still pick up the ball, pick his head up, see what not just jump on the football, right? Not just, again, that is a fire drill moment of all fire drills for a young freshman in crappy weather in a huge moment. And I love how you referenced the Michigan State, the memorable botch there by Michigan a few years ago up in the Big House. I looked like, there's the famous shot, they pan to the Michigan student section and they're all doing the surrender cobra, right? Like they're all like, oh my, that was me in my basement, like sitting on the couch as Ollie dropped. I was like, we're not about that. We are not about to lose the last game of the season like this. And I'm going to have to think about that for the next 9 months until we're in Happy Valley Labor Day weekend.
Yes.
For him to have that composure throughout that fire drill, Ollie Straw, I'm not wearing a hat right now, but if I did, I would tip it to you.
You tip it down under. That's a good one.
That's my pivotal moment of the 9.
And I like that you had 9. I like all 9 of them. And Owen, I considered the 4th and 1 goal line stop. Okay. Because they really got us earlier with that touchdown from the 4. They went in unbalanced and they threw that swing route. It was really a lateral. They got us good and we didn't account for that. And to shortly thereafter get that stop on 4th and 1, I'm holding them no points. But there were a lot to pick from. What do you go with, Owen?
Yeah, I like the run that set up that 57-yarder. It was like a little inside belly play. He kind of jump cut out. You could really tell the team was fired up because all those guys got in behind him and pushed him for an extra 5-6 yards.
Yeah.
But you could tell the team was super juiced. And then, on the pursuing play, he takes it on that zone right play and takes it to the house. So I was right there where you were, Jed. I really thought that second one sealed it up. People were you could just, when they panned to the sidelines, looked like the energy was with us. And like I said, that play that set up that 57-yarder, like it was just that little belly, but the push at the end, the effort, right?
Yeah. Zach Frazier and those guys flying in.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like that's like those guys are like, dude, we're doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that extra effort and that's what it takes, man. You just got to do that all the time. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes kids don't really, and I know coaches stress it on defense, but on offense, when you got a group of big guys that are into that, like hustling till the whistle, because if you watch a lot of teams, once those guys plays away from them, they kind of,
you're right. Absolutely.
They do their thing. When you put that extra effort in there, it just juices the sideline, man. And like we've talked about, man, momentum's everything in the game of football. So that really got me. And then obviously, like I said, for him to put the cherry on the top with the big run, really loved the patience. I was just watching it here. Guys gonna have that backside backer comes to Phil, and our backside guard really stones him up, or it was either that or the center. Just a well designed play, zone blocked beautifully, bangs it in there. He's gonna be special, man. That's what I'm saying. A guy who gets it right away when you put him in there, he's only gonna get better. So he's naturally understanding it. I don't know if that's something he came, maybe they ran zone in high school. Or he had some sort of options, or maybe he's just really getting in there. I mean, these are limited reps he's had. I mean, he looks good.
On the first touchdown, the first long one.
Yeah.
Again, this was just clinic type stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
You had a situation where that backer, Mason Cobb, he tried to fill. And this sense of desperation, you as a running back have seen this a million times. When you're running the stretch play and it's working, he's filling it. It's like, Wes, you're trying to pick a door and every gap represents a different door, but the doors are all on wheels moving.
Yeah.
And so he desperately commits to the
Yeah.
wrong gap, and now he's trapped, and Jalen just slips on to the next gap, and it's just like, that's what the stretch play is supposed to look like. Yes, this feeling of futility on the defense where you're like, I got to commit to something, I'm guessing, and you just dive into a gap and you're like, oh, I guess wrong. He's heading the other. Oh, it was just beautiful.
No, it is beautiful. And looking at that play right now, man, just that's the thing about the zone. You got to run it. You got to run it. It sets up the next one, sets up the next one, sets up the next one.
You got to major in it.
And you have to. You can't. It's not a. It's
like
a
the jab. It's like the jab in boxing, right?
Yeah, that's part of your deal, man. You always are running it. You always are running it. If you look at our teams from back in the day, that was our bread and butter. You know what I mean? And you live and eat on it, and that's what ends up happening in that zone. You get those guys reaching or whatever they're doing. You know what I mean? They just need to be running their feet up front. And if you read their hats right, I'm telling you, it's big all the time. It is. It's just
defense can't be right, can they? If you run it,
they can't be right.
Can't be right. Yeah,
can't be right. So that's why it's just once you get good at it, man, it's fun to watch a rushing attack just absolutely eat up a defense.
Because Jalen's sitting there thinking, Wes, what we're describing, like I just talked about Mason Cobb committing to that gap, and he's thinking, I picked the wrong gap, and he's like, you're thinking as you watch this, no, you didn't. If you'd picked the other gap, Jalen would have read off of you and just used the leverage against you. No, you can't be right.
Yeah. That's what's so fun. That's what's so great about it. So, I mean, it's something you really, like you said, Jed, you got to major in it, man. Yeah. I enjoyed running the zone so much. It gave, as a fullback, your majority of the time, you're blocking. That's what it is. But getting into a scheme like the zone, it was a lot of fun because I was reading the play as well. You know what I mean? I had to make the read sometimes quicker than the running back did because there just wasn't that much development. So sometimes you might even create the read by chipping a guy and giving that guy the leverage if you think he's going to beat him, and you can get in there and kind of clean things up.
That's an angle of daylight the back's now going to see. It's all about horizontal displacement. In other words, you can't be wrong if as a unit you collectively work. And like I said, I think of that double team that Zach and Doug had on that nose guard. That dude was trying to squeeze that gap. Now stop and think about that. He pre-snap, that defensive tackle was thinking, all right, this A gap, I'm squeezing this A gap.
Yeah.
And little did he know, no, you're not. You're going to end up 40 feet away on the other hash. Not only that gap's on the other side of the field, buddy. You're not squeezing it. Yeah.
No, it's literally ingenious. I mean, and I hope to see a lot more of it next year. I hope we call that more. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Because
Jalen's a lot to be excited about. You're right, Al.
I'm telling you, man, that's the thing. It happens like this. And when you're about to pop sometimes, that's how it goes, man. You not all the chips are right there yet. It's not all lined up. Once it gets there and it clicks into place, man, look out. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens this
you don't really, on a scale 1 to 10, when you're trying to master that scheme, you don't really go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8.
Yeah.
It's like it clicks, and there you are. So, so anyway, this was fun.
It was. Do I say it? I'm going to say it. Shades of Steve Slayton on Saturday. All right, I said it. Oh, I said it. All right. That's you don't want to. I mean, you don't want to put those type of expectations on a guy. I don't mean it in that way, right? It's like every time a good quarterback comes out of the NFL, is this guy the next Tom Brady? All right, way to go, right? Is this guy the next LeBron James? Well, you just set him up to fail. Congratulations. I don't mean it in that regard, but just watching the return of the zone run scheme there, it took me back to my childhood, my teenage years.
Yeah.
And that was certainly a lot of fun on Saturday. We got one more break to get to. When we come back on the other side, we'll wrap this thing up. We'll take a look at our Twitter poll results, and we'll tell you about a special episode that we've got dropping later this week as well, too. We'll do all that when we return. You're listening to ITG. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Mountaineer Nation, have you visited us online? For great gifts and gear and our entire episode playlist, check out itgfootball.com.
Final segment here of episode 30 in the gun. We'll talk about our next episode in just a minute, but first we had a Twitter poll up on our ITG Twitter account. That's at In the Gun Podcast is where you can follow us on Twitter. We'll pull up the graphic now. Our poll brought to you by Toothman Ford. Which of these 100-plus yard rushing performances by a Mountaineer was most impressive this season? 4 options. 163 by Tony against Baylor. 155 by Jalen on Saturday against Okie State. $125 by CJ up there in the backyard brawl against Pitt to start the season. And 119 on the ground by Garrett Green against the Sooners. CJ, his $125 against Pitt, pretty comfortably winning this one with 46% of the vote. Jalen in second with 25, and then real close between Garrett and Tony. Garrett gets the slight edge there with just about 2% more of the vote. Which way did you go there, Jedgar?
I went with Jalen because I knew a lot of people would go with CJ. But here's what I noticed, guys, real quick. Out of the 4 on the poll, we won 3 of those games and should have won the 4th. Yeah. So this just in, it kind of matters when you effectively run the football, right?
Certainly does. I went with 163 against Baylor, but that's just because me and Big O were there.
I know, I did too, man. I was like, damn, when that didn't win, I was like, man, people don't know anything about this poll.
Not only didn't win, Big O, it came in dead last, but that's all right. It might be last in the poll
in my running back career, I guess.
It's down there with Garrett. It's in good company because what Garrett did against Oklahoma was impressive.
It might be last in the poll, but it's number 1 in Owen and I's hearts, and that's what really matters. Thanks again to our friends at Bet Online for presenting this episode of ITG. Reminder, it's a fantastic time of the year for sports. You got college and NFL, you got the NBA, you got the NHL, all kinds of stuff going on. World Cup is getting into full swing here with the knockout games coming up soon. So betonline.ag if you're trying to get a little juice on any of the action. And they got you covered. You name the sport, they got it. Betonline.ag. Gentlemen, good stuff here. This will not be our only episode this week. We'll have another ITG No Huddle coming your way in just a short while. That, of course, are shorter, more condensed episodes. We'll take a look at some of the conference championship games, make some predictions and some projections there, and we'll also give our final tally of our scoreboard of the predictions that we made throughout the season. So that'll do it for this one. I thought this was one of our better episodes, gentlemen. Well done.
A lot of content. Yeah.
A lot of
good conversation, guys. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Good
you always know you're rolling when you get Owen talking about the stretch play, brother.
I love it.
You're in some good content right there.
Don't stop him. He's on a roll.
Yep, that's when the pants start to tingle.
Oh, geez, how many different pants and balls and wet references can we make in this episode? For crying out loud! A reminder: our mission statement: you're only young once, but you can be immature forever. For the Runaway Beer Truck, Owen Schmidt, and the Signalcaller, Jed Drenning, be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. And we'll be back soon with a special ITG No Huddle. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you later this week.